Hello everyone, welcome to this video. In this one I quickly wanted to go over some of the Azure best practices and give you some hands-on demo. But if you need even more in-depth analysis, you should look at the Azure landing zone video that I did just previous to this one. Just search in my channel for Azure landing zones. So with the Azure best practices, the idea is to start strong and plan early. Once you have a whole bunch of resources deployed, it is very difficult to fix any problems with them. So you start strong, you define most of the common sense practices, best practices and security around it for all of your resources. So you know that even from the very beginning you are adopting a zero trust framework. Some of the things that we're going to cover are management group structure, naming conventions, tagging standards, RBAC policies and security requirements. Okay, so again, make use of the Azure landing zone blueprints. There are multiple ones available, and based on your own requirement, choose the proper one. These landing zone templates, they are defined generally for the multi-subscription environment that requires scaling, security, governance, networking and identity. And if you use those and deploy the blueprint of these landing zones to your Azure subscription, you will have all the policies enabled, all the resource groups created, key vaults created, networking done, monitoring enabled. So all the good things you will have automatically enabled. So it will help you a lot to get started with the best practices within Azure. Now let's talk about the management group. So management group is something that you have to think at the very beginning. If I go over here and go to my subscriptions, you see that I have 3 different subscriptions. Okay, so when you create your subscriptions, all the subscriptions are usually grouped under the root management group, but it's a base practice. You should group these management groups properly. So if I go to management group and here is my current management group, this is how it looks like. The root one you cannot change, but then you can create sub management group, and if you want, even if you can create additional management group under these management groups as well. Now I have created 2 management groups under the tenant root, and here I have placed all 3 of my subscriptions. Now if the salesperson department they comes and asks me for a subscription, I most likely I'll put it over here. And if they're using that for the test environment, I'm going to put it here. For the dev, I might create another management group and put all of their development in that particular management group. So think about your management group structure very early, and this way you can also apply your organizational governance policy at the root level, at the highest level possible, so all the subscriptions inside one particular management group gets all the policies uniformly applied. Okay, so let's go back to our presentation. So naming standard is another very important. So when you create your resources and subscriptions especially, so you will get the default name that comes from the Microsoft, and you will get an unique ID. Like this one, all 3 of them used to have Azure Pass sponsorship. If you're creating a pay-as-you-go, you will have pay-as-you-go subscription, but they all have different unique IDs. Your subscription can be renamed, and I would highly recommend you come up with your company's naming standard that will easily help you identify, okay, this subscription is, what is it for? It's for production environment, this is for the development, things like that. Very important. And if you have a resource group and if you have multi-subscription environment, sometimes you can end up with this situation. So let's see if I do a sample. So see, I have 2 resource group. Okay, both are named exactly the same, and then but one is deployed in IT prod and another in IT dev. So these names are no longer unique. But if had I put my subscription name in here, like I would have put an IT prod dash sample resource group and over IT dev dash sample resource group, then those 2 resource group name would have been unique to each other, right? So think about those kind of things, and so take your subscription and add it to your resource group just to make sure that everything is unique. If you're in a multi-cloud, maybe even think about adding Azure at the very beginning AWS at the beginning, Google Cloud at the beginning, to just make sure that everything is very, very unique in your environment. Because you're gonna, at the end, you got to think about integrating with your CMDB. And a lot of CMDB like service now, your name has to be unique for a record. So let's go back over here. Again, as I said, think about the CMDB. So we covered that. So let's go to the next one. Public endpoint. So some best practices is you try not to use the public endpoints unless it's absolutely necessary. Like if you're using the Azure app services, you probably want to expose your application to the whole world. But if you're using a database, if you're using a storage account, if you're using Cosmos DB, do you really want to expose those endpoints to the internet? So think about that. If there is no need, do not expose that. If you're using SSH or RDP to connect to your systems, do you really want the whole world to be able to connect and talk to those ports? Or do you want to restrict those to certain IP addresses, or use a secure connection that can only access those ports, or just allow only from a certain VNet that is inside Azure that you are going to use to connect back to these particular virtual machines? So think about that, and whenever possible, do not allow any ports that are not necessary. So some of the database based practices, again, avoid public endpoints. And if you're using infrastructure as a code, typically you would allow access over 1443 for the SQL servers, but only allow access from within Azure virtual network, or even specific subnet, and then whenever appropriate, use network ASGs and network security group in SG, network security groups to configure. So NSGs are firewalls at an instance level, and ASG, so you can use multiple applications and to apply a group of security controls together. So use them. Again, if you're using a PaaS type database structure, database resources, then you have some more options available to you. Typically, they will all come with a firewall protection, so you can go to even Cosmos DB, SQL Server, and you can limit the IP addresses that can connect to that particular service. And you should always disable the allow access to Azure services option, which is on by default, and use Azure Defender for some of these services. So let me just take a maybe look at let's just do Azure SQL and see. We don't have to even deploy everything, but we can just take a look at some of the security features. So if you click on that one, so let's say I'm going to create a SQL database. Let's see, SQL database is fine. Then let's see what happens. The next is come over here, database name, just put something and create a new server. And then provide some admin username. And then hit OK. And over here I'm gonna use a basic one and apply. And over here I don't need any geo redundancy. And then go to networking, and here this is what I'm talking about. So over here you see that you have no access, which is the most secure option, and you can use private endpoint, which I recommend. Public endpoint, if you click on it, here are the firewall rules. This is a little bit confusing. See, here the default option is allow Azure services and resources to access this server. So do not use the yes over here, use the no. Okay, if you read this, setting allow Azure services and resources to access the server to yes allows communication from all the resources inside the Azure boundary that may not be part of your subscription. So that's a security risk. Okay, and if you want only the current IP address to connect to this particular SQL, you can add this, that will add the current IP address and allow the IP address to get back to the server. So here again, I recommend that you use the Azure Defender for SQL. So you can start the free trial, and after that it's a 13 USD per server per month. And there are other things that I'm not going to talk about. So those two things, security feature and the networking, that I recommend. And similar feature you will find in many other PaaS type solutions like Cosmos DB and other services. And use private endpoints. If you're using public endpoints, be very careful. Now over here, let's go to the next one. And as I already told you, the general guideline is to use the private endpoints and disable the public endpoint. Private endpoint forces all the traffic to go through your own defined route and defined subnets. Public endpoints will bypass everything and will allow connection over the internet, so which is not always desired. Then again, the disable access to the management ports, like if you're using port 22, port 3389, things like that. Try to use point to site, site to site, or Azure Express route instead of using the internet to connect to those ports. So you have a policy. If you cannot implement this policy, then try to restrict to certain IPs only who can come to this particular ports for a resource. For example, let's see if I have any virtual machine available to me at the moment. So virtual machine, let's see if there's anything. Okay, so there is some. So this one is running. So if I can go in there, and would it be under connect? So over here, this virtual machine is actually connected to everything. So let's go to security. Let's see if there is anything available in security. There is some recommendation, and the recommendations are loading. So vulnerability assessment solution should be enabled. So follow those. Disk encryption should be applied to all virtual machine. Do that. We'll talk about encryption a little bit more. Management port should be closed on a virtual machine. See, so this is what we talked about. Management ports of virtual machines should protect with just-in-time network access. That is again a security center feature that we will talk about. And system updates should be installed on your device. So I have a whole bunch of problems, and so this is another reason why you should always integrate security center and look at these solutions when you are creating and using a virtual machine. So let's just try to create one virtual machine, and that will also should give me some options. So test VM, and just use something else, and then disk. Not gonna change anything. Networking, if I come over here, public IP basic, and let's just not allow any inbound ports. Okay. NIC security group, you can configure your own security group if you like. This one is going to install a security group for you. Let's go to management. Actually, you know what, let's come back over here, allow this one, and we're going to allow the port 22. Okay, then go to management, and let's see over here what we want to do. I'm trying to look for an option where I thought you can actually specify the IP address. Networking, okay, virtual network. Here, there we go. So let's see, virtual network. When creating a virtual machine, select a network. So just select one of these. Subnet public IP. So they are gonna get public inbound port. Okay, so public inbound port allow selected port is good. So I don't see that option right now. These interfaces, they change so rapidly. Sometimes I come back in 2 days, everything is different. Hold on. So use okay, from here I'm not seeing it options, but a lot of time in lot of resources it will let you, it's okay, only allow this particular IP address to connect to your machine. So it's probably, so what you have to do, you probably have to go to the security group and then configure that. So let's just go back to the machine and show you how to do that once it's deployed. So for some of the resources you can configure at the same time, but I'm just gonna back to this one. This is still running, and I should have my networking and security groups. Let's see here. So over here you have this security rule over here from this NSC. Here is your source, and here's your destination, and source is right now any, and I don't want any. I wanted IP address, and I can provide my own IP address in this one if I like. So I'm just gonna search for my IP, and it should give me my IP address, and I can take this and provide that IP address over to Azure. Okay, so let's see if it's going to take my IPv6. This is my IPv4 address. Let's take this one, copy, and come back over here, put it over here. So that is, at least you are exposing your RDP, but only exposing to one particular IP address and not to the whole world. Okay, so that's my security recommendation. And JIT is even better. So JIT is something, it's just in time. It's a feature of Azure Security Center. So you can come back to over here, go to the Security Center. I think you have to integrate it first. Actually, Security Center, and you go there, and at the very bottom, I think you have, as let's just search for JIT. Let's see if it shows up over here. Just in time. Not showing up over here. Let's see, go to any VMs. I'm looking at coverage. So here 18 resources are covered. Let's see what is covered. Check access. I don't need this one. Let's come back over here. Not showing up in here, so I'm going to go back to my Azure virtual machine, this one, and look for JIT, see if this is available. Okay, under security, let's go in there, and here we already looked at just in time, so it was probably not enabled. So let's see, just in time. So let's click on that one. Management ports should with just in time, and what you need to do over here in this one, since this is not enabled, so you gotta hit the fix button to fix this problem. So what it's gonna do, all the network security group that's always there, what is gonna happen if I say save, I got a request for a just-in-time VM access. Once I have the access requested and it's granted, Azure is dynamically create those ports and let me connect via those ports. Once my work is done, Azure will automatically get rid of all the ports. So think about how much more security that you are gaining just by not enabling the ports permanently, but only enabling that only for the work, the time that you need them to be open. So use that feature as much as possible to make your workloads very, very secure. So let's come back over here. So we talked about the just-in-time and data. It's pretty simple these days. So the idea is to use encryption, encrypt your data at rest and data in motion. So for like when you're in virtual machine, your disk and your data disk, keep it encrypted, and when you're using your storage account, Cosmos DB, anything like that, use the HTTPS, and also TLS 1.2, and security best practices, manage your own keys. Then when you're adapting to the cloud, okay, my recommendation is do more than just lift and shift. Move to PaaS, move to even serverless, go to even function apps. So more you are moving to those kind of environment, you are giving out the responsibility of security to your cloud provider. So you're saying, okay, I don't want to manage my infrastructure, I don't want to manage my patches, I don't want to manage my platform. You just worried about writing your code. So you have to do your cost analysis and make sure that it's still cost effective, and design and move to that type of solutions. Now, other standard things: use cloud monitoring, use logging, integrate Azure Security Center, use Defender, use advanced DDoS protection. Then you have keep an eye on the Azure Service Health, configure auto scaling for most of your architecture, integrate with Azure Active Directory. Then auditing, enable it for most of your resources. Again, enable MFA, that is very very important for all high privilege account. Actually, I would recommend even use PIM for your privileged accounts within Azure. Install patches periodically if you have the infrastructure as a service type deployments, and also create a baseline and monitor. Now, all of these I'm going to show you how you can very easily implement using the Azure Security Center. So let's just go back to Azure, and if you go, and I'm just going to open up the policies. So there are two policies that I recommend everyone to implement, and that will get you most of the stuff that we talked about. So if you go to definitions, the two policies that we're going to look at are, and over here I'm just going to look for the initiatives and the built-in. Okay, and here you can even look for you can look for categories. So just maybe you can do for security center, and that will give you, these are the three initiatives that are for the security center. So look, so there is one for the enable data protection suite. So that's definitely, you would like to enable that. Configure advanced threat protection to be enabled for open source relational database. Go ahead and enable that. But this is the main one that I always want everyone to enable, and this is the Azure Security Benchmark. So if you click on that one, it's got 199 policies in it, in this initiative definition, and these are all very very specific to Azure and Azure configurations, and these are all common sense type policies that you should be enabled, and I would recommend enable them as many as in a deny mode. Like log analytics should be installed, certificates should have specified maximum validity period, key vault secrets should have an expiration date, so you have a rotation. Vulnerabilities in security configuration at scale should be remediated. Guest configuration extension should be installed on your machines. Then storage accounts should restrict network access. Just read this list is priceless, and it just comes as a default setting. All you need to do is assign, and you assign to a particular subscription or to the root management group, and you are done. So now you can start auditing your resources, and then when you feel comfortable, you can make them as a deny mode, and nobody can deploy any resources that violates any of these policies. Now I said two of the policies, so let's just go back and I'll show you the other policy that I personally used many times and would recommend everyone to use. Let me go back. So sometimes this Azure is a little slow. So, and the other one is really the CIS benchmark. Okay, so over here, let's come back over definitions again. It's taking some time, and then again we'll go to initiatives and built-in, and here is my CIS Microsoft benchmark. Okay, so this is again some policies that I personally use and I recommend everyone, and this is some MFA. External accounts with read permission should be removed, Azure Defender for servers should be enabled, then you have disk encryption should be applied, monitor missing endpoint protections. If you have any where you don't have the security integration, report those. Vulnerability assessment should be enabled in your virtual machine. So these are again all common sense policies that you should always have. Doesn't matter where you are really, in the cloud or on-prem. So the last thing I'm gonna show you is, if you do a Google search on Azure Security Center benchmark, this is the really good one to go over. And this is really going to tell you what it is and how they have defined, and you are really going to see a section about Azure security benchmarks. You have an introduction, overview of the security controls and the baselines. Then you have a breakdown of those different controls like network security, identity management, privilege access, data protection, asset management. Then you will see, even further breakdown by compute security baseline, analytics security baseline, database security baseline, and what kind of controls we already have that comes for free and built in within the Azure Security Center default policies. Okay, so please take some time to review this document and go over this one, and I think you're gonna learn a wealth of knowledge if you just go through this documentation, and you will have a lot good understanding about Azure best practices when you move to the cloud. Again, before I finish, remember to review my video on Azure landing zone, and that will also have a lot of good interesting features, how you use it, how you implement Azure best practices very easily and quickly. Alright, thanks for watching the video. Hopefully this was useful to you. If you like it, please click the like button and subscribe, and have a great day. Thank you.